This is Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan. It was a venue that never felt polished, and it didn't need to. It felt like Detroit. Loud, practical, a little rough around the edges, and not interested in looking pretty for anybody. But that same personality made the building a pretty good fit for pro wrestling too. Hey again everyone, I'm Alex, and today in episode 12, I'm counting down my personal top 10 wrestling moments in Joe Louis Arena history. This place was hockey first. The Red Wings, the championship banners, and the electric atmosphere were all part of it. Locally known as The Joe, the arena opened in 1979 along the Detroit River and replaced Olympia Stadium as the home of the Red Wings. It sat next to Cobo Hall in the part of downtown where Detroit held its biggest events. The nearby People Mover station and the huge front staircase also became familiar parts for fans arriving at the building. Most people probably remember the building for the Red Wings teams of the 90s and 2000s. Detroit won 4 Stanley Cups during that run, the championship banners started filling the rafters, and the whole place became tied to the city's hockey town reputation. The venue was named after Joe Louis, one of the greatest heavyweight boxing champions ever and a major figure in Detroit sports history. So even before Bob Probert and Darren McCarty started throwing punches there, the name already carried plenty of fighting history. That was the building wrestling walked into. Now, let's get to that list. Starting the list at number 10 is John Cena making his WWE pay-per-view debut against Chris Jericho at Vengeance 2002. There wasn't much here that looked like the Cena who'd eventually spend more than 2 decades near the top of the company. He was still just a prototype of that guy. Cena had only been on WWE television for a few weeks, and they'd already put him across from the first Undisputed Champion in Chris Jericho. Once the match started, Y2J put the boots to Cena and treated him like the inexperienced rookie that he was. In the end, Jericho's ego got the best of him. When he tried to lock Cena in the walls, Cena slipped out and caught him with a roll-up for the win. It wasn't presented as the start of something huge, though. Cena was still a new guy trying to prove he belonged on the main roster, but the fact that Joe Louis Arena hosted Big Match John's pay-per-view debut made this an easy choice for my list. The number 9 spot goes to The Rock and Steve Austin taking on Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash in a 3-on-2 handicap match on the go-home episode of Raw before WrestleMania 18. These 3 guys, as the NWO, had only been back for a few weeks after returning at No Way Out, and this was the first time that Hogan, Hall, and Nash wrestled together in a WWF ring as the NWO. The match was really there to sell the pay-per-view, with Nash serving as the odd man out since he wasn't officially booked for Mania. The most notable part for me came when Hogan and Austin briefly ended up in the ring together. We never got the singles match, so watching them trade punches here was about as close as it ever came. Rock made the final comeback, but Hogan eventually got him alone, hit the big boot and leg drop, and picked up the win for the NWO. This makes my list because it's still hard to believe a match with this much star power happened in the main event of Raw. 5 of the biggest names from the Monday Night War sharing the ring at once was more than enough to earn a spot in my top 10. For number 8, I'm going to go with Hulk Hogan defending the WCW Championship against the Giant at Halloween Havoc 1995. Before they even got to the title match, the two had a monster truck sumo battle on the roof of nearby Cobo Hall. Hogan won, then they started fighting near the edge of the roof, and the Giant took what we can only presume to be one hell of a bump off the side of the building. Despite this, he still showed up for the main event later that night, because apparently plunging hundreds of feet into the Detroit River isn't enough to send anyone to an early grave. Oddly enough, we got a version of Hogan's pre-Hollywood gimmick here in his short-lived Dark Side phase, wearing black gear and wrestling without the mustache. 23-year-old Paul White was making his WCW in-ring debut here after spending the previous few months with the Dungeon of Doom going after Hogan. Jimmy Hart turned on Hogan during the match and helped the Giant win the championship through a clause he'd added to the contract. But the best, when I say best, I really mean worst, was coming down the aisle. It was the debut of the Yeti. Shout out to fan of the channel Nathan for that one. The Yeti also belonged to the Dungeon of Doom and was the giant mummy that joined the Giant in putting Hogan in a double bear hug. There was no way in hell I was going to leave this one off the list, but Halloween Havoc 95 gave Joe Louis Arena one of the most ridiculous main events WCW ever produced. Who booked this shit? Jeff Hardy's WWE Championship defense against Edge at the 2009 Royal Rumble comes in at number 7. Hardy was only about 6 weeks into his first WWE title reign after winning it at Armageddon the month prior. Edge was already involved with Vicky Guerrero, so she made this a no DQ match, and Chavo interjected himself almost immediately. Jeff managed to take Chavo out with a swanton bomb from a ladder through the announce table, and later looked like he had Edge beaten after another swanton in the ring. Vicky pulled referee Scott Armstrong out before he could count to 3, though. But Jeff appeared to get some help in the form of his brother Matt, who came down to ringside carrying a chair. As you'd expect if you've watched more than 1 hour of pro wrestling in your life, Matt clocked Jeff in the head with one of those chairs, turned heel, and essentially handed the championship back to Edge. The turn made Jeff's first WWE Championship reign the start of another Hardy Brothers feud. They'd already split once before in late 2001, but doing it here with Jeff finally on top of the company made it feel much bigger. Kurt Angle's televised WWF in-ring debut against Shawn Stasiak at Survivor Series 1999 lands at number 6. Angle was only 3 years removed from winning an Olympic gold medal, but the Detroit crowd wasn't exactly treating him like a future legend here. Stasiak controlled more of the match than you might expect, and the fans quickly started getting restless. Kurt stepped outside the ring, grabbed a mic, and cut a promo reminding everyone that they were booing an Olympic gold medalist. It earned him some good heat, and the match eventually ended with Angle plating Stasiak with the Olympic Slam for the win. For me, the appeal is that Joe Louis Arena hosted the first televised match of one of the best wrestlers of his generation. The halfway point belongs to Randy Orton winning the 2009 Royal Rumble match. Orton was in the middle of one of the strongest heel runs of his career here. The Legacy faction had recently come together, and only 6 days earlier, he'd punted Mr. McMahon in the head on Monday Night Raw. The Viper entered the match at number 8, followed by Ted DiBiase Jr. at number 10, and Cody Rhodes at number 15. The three spent a large portion of the match working together and making sure Randy remained in a good position to win. The Rumble's final 4 came down to all 3 members of Legacy and Triple H. Hunter managed to eliminate DiBiase and Rhodes, but while he was still focused on those 2, Orton came up from behind and dumped him over the top rope. Joe Louis Arena hosted Orton's first Rumble victory at a point where his character was really starting to hit another level. Coming in at number 4 is The Undertaker defeating Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship at Survivor Series 1991. Hogan was still the defining star of the company, while The Undertaker had only debuted 1 year earlier at the previous Survivor Series. He was already being booked differently from the rest of the roster, but this was his first chance to prove he belonged in the WWF title picture. The match was promoted as the Gravest Challenge, and Ric Flair eventually made sure Hulk didn't leave Detroit with the title. Flair slid a steel chair into the ring, Undertaker delivered the tombstone onto it, and pinned Hogan to win his first taste of WWF Gold and that perfect Winged Eagle belt. His reign only lasted 6 days, but that doesn't take much away from the moment. Steve Austin getting run over at Survivor Series 1999 takes the number 3 spot. Austin was supposed to challenge Triple H and The Rock for the WWF Championship in the main event. After being jumped during an interview with Kevin Kelly by Triple H, Austin followed Hunter to the parking lot, just how it was planned. Headlights appeared through a gate, and what followed was Austin being hit by a black sedan before it sped away from the scene. Nobody watching at the time knew the real reason Austin was being removed from TV. All they saw was the biggest star in the company being loaded into an ambulance while the entire pay-per-view changed around him. Big Show replaced Austin in the main event and ended up winning his first WWF Championship here. The attack also kicked off the mystery of who ran over Stone Cold, which WWE carried for months before revealing Rikishi did it for The Rock. This makes my list because the angle changed the main event and gave the Joe a backstage scene that still stands out from the Attitude Era. Just missing the top spot is The Rock winning the undisputed WWE Championship against The Undertaker and Kurt Angle at Vengeance in 2002. Big Evil came in as champion, while Rock was wrestling his first pay-per-view match since returning to WWE that summer. Angle had earned his way into the match after wrestling Taker to a draw, so all 3 felt like believable choices to leave the Motor City with the championship. The match moved fast, with all 3 guys breaking up pin attempts and even using each other's finishers along the way. In the end, Angle hit Undertaker with the Angle Slam, but Rock came back with the Rock Bottom on Angle and got the 3 count. Rock's 7th WWE Championship win happened here, more than a decade before he returned to win it one final time in 2013. But The Rock, Undertaker, and Angle sharing the same main event was more than enough to earn this a spot on my list. And at number 1, there really couldn't be anything else. Stone Cold Steve Austin driving a Zamboni into the Joe on Raw from September of 1998. Mr. McMahon was preparing to award the WWF Championship to either Undertaker or Kane after both men had pinned Austin at Breakdown in Your House the night before. Oddly, the retired Winged Eagle belt was used for this segment. But Austin wasn't about to let McMahon's championship ceremony go as planned. Stone Cold drove a bright blue Miller Time branded Zamboni through the stage and crashed it into the ringside area, climbed on top, and launched himself over the ropes towards the chairman. Austin was quickly swarmed by the Detroit PD and arrested, but not before getting his hands on his boss. This makes my list because the setting fit the stunt perfectly. Being that the Joe was the home of the Wings, Austin using a piece of hockey equipment to interrupt Vince felt like something that could only happen in this building. It's an image from Austin and McMahon's rivalry that still stands out, and I couldn't put anything else ahead of it at number 1. And that bell brings us to the end of my list of top 10 wrestling moments in Joe Louis Arena history. The building will always be remembered as the home of the Red Wings, but wrestling left behind plenty of its own moments here too. Joe Louis Arena closed in July of 2017 after one final WWE house show. The Wings moved over to Little Caesars Arena, and demolition began in 2019 on the Joe. By the middle of 2020, the Joe was completely gone. Today, the former arena site is known as Water Square, a new riverfront development built around apartments, planned hotels, and a direct connection to the convention center. Let me know which moment you would have had at number 1 or what I left off the list down in the comments. Next time, I'm heading to Vancouver to dig into Rogers Arena. Thanks for the house.